Hey guys, this is SUNSfan with a guide on Dota 2 roles.
Carry.
The first role we will cover is that of the carry, which if you are a newbie should probably stay away from at the start. The basic idea behind a carry is to eventually take over the game in the later stages. Carries tend to be agility based but don't have to be. The reason agilities are usually the carries is because they normally have a higher agility growth throughout the game. 1 point of agility will increase your physical armor by 0.14, as well as increase your attack speed by 1. Carries also tend to be item dependent, so getting them as much farm throughout the game should be a top priority for your supports. This is why in the laning phase you so often see what is called a babysitter alongside the carry. The babysitter, which is many times a support, has the job of taking care of the aforementioned carry, which means sacrificing farm as well as even your life from time to time. If your teammates do enough to get you farm for the late game, and you, as the carry, aren't a completely awful player, you'll have a terrific chance at winning the game. Some examples of a carry would include Anti-Mage, whose mana burn makes him ridiculous throughout the game, but more so his escapability and innate tankiness makes him a very tough foe to kill. Faceless Void, on the other hand, can just bash the crap out of people in later stages of the game, while a carry like Dro relies heavily on her insane amount of damage for kills.
Support.
The second role of this guide is that of the supports, which we touched on earlier. A support's job in many cases is to first and foremost make sure there's a courier purchased and upgraded in a timely manner. The role of a support usually lies in the intelligence class, but again, this is not always the case. Also keep in mind that wards are also essential to a support's job. Having vision of the map is completely game breaking and if done correctly can make your game a piece of cake. And just to be clear, when I say wards, I mean both observer wards and sentry wards. Having normal vision from observer wards just isn't enough. Counter warding, which is the act of destroying the opposite team's wards, is a crucial part of playing a support role. Unlike the carry class, supports are very item independent and can help the team in other ways, mainly their spells, but could also include items such as mechanism if enough farm is supplied. But as we talked about earlier, being a hard support and babysitter are interchangeable. Just make sure your neutral camps are stacked and pulled, since this is a great way to allow your lanes to be pushed back, which will therefore allow your carry to free farm. Some examples of support would have to be Crystal Maiden, whose aura helps her team on a global scale. Lich is another great example with his ability to push back lanes with sacrifice, while Vengeful Spirit's stun and swap can get her carry out of horrible situations.
Initiator.
The next role to discuss is that of the initiator, which is the one that is relied on so heavily to ignite team fights. What makes someone a good initiator is either his ability to take damage or simply those that have huge AoE ultimates. These heroes aren't horribly item dependent, but in many cases will need a blink dagger in order to be most effective. Examples of an initiator would definitely include the likes of Earthshaker, Sand King, and Enigma, all of which have devastating ultimates.
Ganker.
Gankers are the next role in line. Typically you want your ganker to be in the middle lane so he has easy access to both top and bottom lane, which means rune control is a must. Any successful gank in the early to mid stage of the game can have a huge impact on the game, as preventing consistent farm on the opposing carry just might be enough to disrupt them into a poorly played game. I would definitely classify a ganker as being item independent, but not to the same degree as those of the support role. Getting a core item or two could help snowball a ganker into a full-blown killing machine. What makes a good ganker is their skill composition. Usually having some sort of a stun or slow is needed, but may not be necessary if you're able to surprise the opposition team with some aggression. Some examples of gankers would have to be Tiny, whose ridiculous burst damage and snowball ability are very tough to control. Pudge is also on this list, not only because he snowballs to a high degree, but also because he can surprise the crap out of an enemy team with his out-of-nowhere hooks. One last example would have to include the mother of all gankers, Night Stalker, whose inherent slow / mini stun / nuke, coupled with his insane move speed, makes him extremely hard to not feed.
Pusher.
The fifth role on the agenda is that of the pusher. In a push strategy, your goal is to end the game as soon as possible. There are two kinds of pushing, that of lane pushing and that of tower pushing. Although these should be obvious, I will briefly explain them. Lane pushing usually consists of having a spell with a relatively low cooldown that you can use to take out creep waves out speedily. Tower pushing, on the other hand, is having the ability to push down towers like nobody's business. By pushing fast, you are not giving the enemy any room to farm, and if they choose to farm the opposing lanes, you'll take down their towers with relative ease, therefore netting you bursts of gold as well as map control. Typically, pushers are not item dependent, but are most certainly level dependent, since they rely heavily on their skills to push. And although they don't necessarily need items, picking up things such as arcane boots, mechanism, or pipe can help sustain pushes to a high degree. Some of the best pushers would include Pugna, Leshrac, Rasta, Nature's Prophet, and Broodmother, all of which are terrific at both lane and tower pushing.
Tank.
Although many could argue against this being an actual role, tanking most certainly has a place in this game. In other games, a tank may consist of a hero that is forcing the opposing team to attack them. That's great and all, but guess what? This is Dota 2, and a tank in our eyes is someone who's able to tank a lot of hits, whether it be from a magical or physical source. Tanks typically have either a very high strength gain or simply need to build tanky in order to accentuate their skill set. Some heroes that are tanky by nature would include Pudge and Axe. Pudge having very high strength gain, while Axe tends to have high armor and, ironically enough, would fulfill the tank role in other games as well. Other heroes that simply build tanky would include the likes of Razor and Viper.
Jungler.
Last but not least on our list of Dota 2 roles would be junglers, which are heroes that can easily survive and farm the jungle in a consistent manner. Aside from the occasional gank, this normally includes heroes that don't leave the jungle until they have their needed items, making them very item dependent. The benefit of having a jungler is the fact that you don't have one hero sucking up the experience in one of the lanes. Examples of successful junglers would have to include Axe, who can tank the crap out of neutrals. Furion and Enigma can also excel in the jungle as they rely on summoned units to do the tanking for them. Thanks for watching, guys, and please remember to subscribe to our YouTube. Also, a special shout out goes to FlawlezZ for his help in writing this guide. You can check him out at his YouTube, which is linked in the following annotation. And finally, please be sure to check out our stream at own3d.tv/DotaCinema, where you can find